Hello and welcome to the Art of Services video series on cybersecurity risk management. My name is Ivanka Menken and today I have with me three experts from Pitcher Partner, an accountancy and IT advisory firm in Brisbane, Australia. I have with me Teresa, Lene and Guru. And Teresa Hooper is the partner and founder of Pitcher Partners. She's basically focusing on the IT consultancy services of the firm. She's both an accountant and a technologist who is able to provide advice on financial and management systems, data analytics, and software support. Through this experience, Teresa has a strong understanding of business risk and governance. And I'm so excited to have her in this interview because the business risk and governance piece, I'm sure we can talk about a lot of that in relation to cybersecurity. And then we have Lene Tuiatua. He's the director of IT, and Lene brings over 15 years of IT service management and technical experience to Pitcher Partners. He's a consultant, and as a consultant, he has extensive awareness and understanding of market trends, business and IT solutions, including IT security. He's particularly experienced in service management and frameworks like ISO and ITIL. He also implemented the IT security standard of ISO 27001. And then we have Guru Baht. He's the engine room techie / programmer / mad scientist, so a true IT guru. He's been integral in the building and brains behind the number of software-related tools, and he has strong understanding of IT operations and technical aspects of IT security. Welcome. That was quite a mouthful. So glad you could make it today. So, like we discussed before we started the recording, because it's the four of us, it's going to be a bit more of an informal discussion. But the one question I really would like to ask is, what made you focus on cybersecurity? Like, what significant event in your career has happened that you said, okay, the rest of my career path, I just can't avoid it. Cybersecurity, security management, risk management, that's what I'm going to focus on. So fight who wants to answer the question.
I guess for me, many years ago, just providing IT support, I was involved in a bit of an outbreak of a virus, an IT virus that crippled the business. And at that point, we had to disconnect from the internet and go through everyone's computers and machines. And it had a huge impact on the business. But from there, I could see that we needed good processes in place. And that sort of got me on the path of service management, ITIL, and also understanding what do we have to do to prevent these sort of things happening in the first place, hence around cybersecurity and patch management, backup, etc. So that was about 15 years ago, and I haven't looked back since in terms of IT security, cybersecurity, and service management.
Yeah. And what about you, Teresa? Because you come at it from a slightly different angle.
Yeah, my background is actually in the health industry, so you have to understand that the information that businesses are keeping are highly confidential and highly personal, and have come across a number of clients who have had cyber attacks, and to have to help them out in relation to whether we can, retrieve the data or it's gone forever. But it's just a place, or a cybersecurity these days is something that every business must actually attain to and take notice of. And it's just something that you come across every day in the everyday business now. So that's why it's of interest.
Yeah, so it's part and parcel of doing business for you.
These days, yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Guru?
Similar along the lines of what Lene just mentioned about his experience. Back in 2005, straight out of uni, I was working as a junior systems engineer. I encountered the first time a real hacking event. So one of our Unix server farm was broken into. As a junior on-call engineer, I did everything I could, but the damage had already happened, and the aftermath was very interesting. The impact was severe, but I then had the opportunity to work with a couple of security experts, and lessons were learned. From there on, it was just implementing the best practice in pretty much everything I did from a technology point of view. These days, I design software, but that one event has had a lot of impact on me, and everything we do these days. The design criteria is mostly around security. So yeah, that one event has had a huge impact on the way I work these days. So the we pretty much think like hackers when we design software. So that has helped me enormously.
Following on from that, I mean, all three of you are involved with the IT consultancy branch of Pitch Your Partners. And obviously you have with your clients a lot of focus on IT security. So in your world, what is the difference between IT security and cyber security? Or where does one stop and the other start?
Yeah, look, cybersecurity is, defending from cyberspace, or I guess from the internet. It's really the external wide web. That's what we're protecting ourselves from. Now, IT security or information security is that actual information that we've got housed in our business or our homes. That's what we're protecting. And these days, all businesses are pretty much connected to the internet. So if you bring the two together, we're protecting that information, those assets, from any cyber attacks that are coming from the internet.
Yeah, so internal attacks, like the internal threats, that's dealt with through IT security. When it's an external threat coming through an external network, internet, then you mention it as a cybersecurity crime.
Correct.
Yeah, just wanted to have the definitions clear. The other thing that I've noticed in the discussions I've had with other experts is the importance of including your advisors in cybersecurity risk management. So can you give me some examples of what kind of examples can you give in your experiences of talking and helping your clients, or talking with your clients and helping your clients in relation to cybersecurity risk management? I think,
sure.
Teresa, they're all looking at you.
We'll work with clients to come up with an IT strategy for their business. And that's not just software or what hardware I put on the desk, but where do they see themselves in the next 5 years, and what do they need in regard to that? So part of that IT strategy is always covering off on the cyber security, as well as the data breaches that happen just normally through your staff and or externally through, as I said, cyber security. So that's really how we're working with our clients to ensure that that is covered off when they do an IT strategy, and it's not something I see is something you can do in isolation. It actually has to be part of a total view of what you're trying to achieve in business.
Yeah. And in your view, where can business owners, I mean, I'm a business owner. How can we as business owners improve our focus on cybersecurity, and where can we reach out for help? Because we probably don't know what we don't know.
That's true. I mean, one of the things you have to do is, actually understand what it is you're trying to protect within your business in terms of cybersecurity, because sometimes I think clients look at their data and they don't actually identify every piece of data that they need to be protecting. So that's one of the things I have to do.
Okay.
You've got to work out where you are now and where do you want to be in the next 12 months even. What do I have to do about that? How do I get there? And of course, I always stipulate that you have to measure everything that you put in place. You have to measure it to see if it was effective. So It's, in 12 months' time, did you get there? Did you achieve everything? Part of this comes around identifying all the risks in your business. And part of what we do in an IT strategy is come up with a risk register to understand what things do we see as directors, owners, stakeholders that has to be protected. And then, you've really got to think about then how do you keep the momentum going as a business owner, because this is not a one-off process. This is a continuing process that has to be monitored. Because, unfortunately, the cyber criminals are getting smarter and maybe a little smarter than us.
Yeah.
So it's something that you have to keep, looking at and progressing.
Yeah. And then from a really practical point of view, because you mentioned you need to identify what you want to protect. You need to identify what data you need to protect. Can you give me some examples of the types of data that really need protecting, but that people completely forget about?
Okay, so for instance, if you have a business that maybe directs debits your customers, that's their bank account details. And you have to protect that data with all your might, really, as well as might from a client's perspective or customer's perspective have personal details such as date of birth, tax file numbers, ABN numbers, although they're available on the internet. But it's that sort of data. You've got to actually identify those pieces and work out what is harmful if it got out there into the wider world and how it could harm other people outside of your organisation.
Yeah.
Health records.
Health records is a big one.
Yeah.
I think that awareness is becoming quite prevalent because of different frameworks around the world. In Australia, we've just recently kicked off notifiable data breach, and that's kind of helping organisations to understand what information are they needing to protect from, vulnerabilities or from cyber attacks.
Even internally, as owners, we all have our staff bank details through payroll these days, so we have to be diligent that doesn't get out there in the wider world as well. So it's internal and externally facing data.
So with the notifiable data breach, that only came into effect in January, February of this year? What took us so long? I mean, in the US, they started a similar regulation in around 2002 or something I read.
Look, they put out a draft of the program back in, I think it was mid-2017. And it went out to anyone to contribute to. I don't know the timelines before that, but I know that a lot of organisations were given the opportunity to review that, and in time they got it to a point where they felt they could launch it. But look, it's good for us to have these sort of standards in place because it helps us to be, I guess, more accountable to comply with standards that protect people's identity and information.
And how can firms like Picture Partners help spread the word around this regulation? Because to be really honest, until recently, I hadn't really heard much about it or about this regulation. So how can Picture Partner or other accounting firms help?
We need to make sure that through our own clientele, through opportunities of newsletters that we send to our clients, there hasn't been a shortage of it either from many other sources. Before it commenced, so late 2017, there was a lot of information spread about it. There's a lot of changes in the financial industry. We've got other things that are happening as well. So the challenge, I think, really is trying to say, hey, look at this one. This is important. So is this, or so is in Australia single touch payroll. There's so many out there. I think it's really just trying to help our customers, our clients, take note of something like the notable data breach so they can actually execute on it and make some changes that they need to do.
Yeah. So maybe it's a matter of information overload. You get emails from the ATO, you get emails from your accountant, from Smart Business. There's so much going on. It's almost like you can't see the forest for the trees anymore. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Guru, question for you. What is the biggest myth around cybersecurity from a technical point of view, in your opinion?
There's a few myths, but I'll touch on one. Often people believe that antivirus will protect us from everything. I mean, as you know, if you asked me the same question back in the 90s, I would have said yes. Antivirus will can protect us. These days, the threats are very sophisticated, and with billions of devices connected to the internet, that's no longer the case. That's one of the myths. And for small businesses, to say we don't have anything worthy of stealing, that's another mindset and a myth that people should be wary of. Again, with the nature of the threats we have these days, any information, personal or otherwise, can be very valuable if it goes into the hands of attackers. So no one's safe. We just have to take measures, and with a bit of homework and some procedures put in house, these things can be avoided. And I think we are at a point where everything from personal data to data that Teresa just mentioned are of very high values to these attackers. Back in the days, it was only the big banks and financial institutions or the big organizations. But these days, every organization is as vulnerable as any other. So yeah, that other than that, any other myths?
Yeah, I think Teresa and I could probably think of one more each. One I can think of is prevention is better than the cure, and a lot of organisations may not have these barriers in place to prevent it in the first place, because they might think, what, if anything happens, that's okay. I'll just restore from backups and it'll be fine. But we know that the carnage that happens after that, or loss of productivity, loss of revenue, or even loss of business, you may not recover from that. So that's another myth.
And I guess the other thing is, the one myth is that people think they're small business, that they're not a target. And I would actually strongly argue that that's not correct. I actually think small business is an easy target, unfortunately. And I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago where it said that Forbes thinks that this business of cybersecurity will net $6 trillion, will be a cost of $6 trillion to business by 2021. So I have personally been involved in a couple of sites that were attacked, and virtually they paid the money. It was easier to pay the money than to actually try and retrieve and recover from the attack, both from a reputation point of view and a time point of view, because obviously to retrieve your data from the backup, etc., takes a lot of time. It was much easier, and in reality, the cyber criminals actually say, pay me the money and I'll release the data, and they normally do, because they've got their own reputation, believe it or not, to protect.
So from your experience, it's the ransomware attacks that are most prevalent at the moment?
That's the ones we hear about the most, but I wouldn't say they're most prevalent. Like we all went through Facebook a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I think no, I mean, every now and then, like in the past 10 to 15 years, there has been one or two attacks that catch everyone's attention. Now, recently it's the ransomware and the variants of those ransomware, but also just simple things like a breaking to say a large database such as Sony network, or even what is that, the dating website, Ashley Madison. So the aftermath of that was there was so much personal data that was stolen, and the people's personal data was available on the darknet for sale. That included everything from their addresses to phone number, their credit card, all those things. So there are different types of threats. It's just being mindful and taking some measures personally and both from an organization's point of view. So yeah, it's always a catch up between the protectors and the attackers. So it's a never ending game, I think.
So as always, prevention is better than fixing afterwards. You also said that there were a couple of things we can do to be better prepared. So what are the top 3 things we can do to be less vulnerable to attacks? And we is, the workers out there in the big bad world.
Ivanka, from our ITIL background, an easier way to look at it would be people, process, and technology. I might just touch on people. And the reason I touch on people is because this is one thing that we experience all the time, even in, offices that we're in or offices that we go to. And it's really just that whole education awareness, because despite all the things that you can do with technology, if people don't understand, IT security, then they're going to leave important documents lying around on the printer. The printer is a real easy place to go to, because you'll find things that have been printed out for payroll or personal information, and who picks that up could be a third party, could be someone who is unauthorized to look at that. So the people side, I think, is one that is going to be an ongoing challenge. It's a big job, but it's a big part of the puzzle, because you can go to a lot of effort in the other areas, but it might just take a simple mistake as a USB left somewhere or something set that's not protected. Teresa?
Oh, great. I guess, if you want to future-proof yourself, it's all of that, but it's really you have to have some sort of protection and response strategy as well, because I do have a belief it's not if, it's probably when you're going to be attacked, because I don't really think we can stop it totally, 100%. And like you said, people have to understand it. They have to have their clear roles if an attack happens. So what's their role in that process? What are they responsible to do? Who do they report to? How quickly do they report to? And what do just general staff do? Tell them not to click on links that we think they might have come in on or whatever. Guru can probably talk about software that's available that helps businesses put in place. I know we have it here that helps us, probably cuts down 99.99% of attacks.
Yeah.
But, 0.1% one day may get through. You might want to talk about the fact that, you need to keep your systems up to date with patches and stuff like that. Technical is not my area. And just generally have a risk management strategy. About how are you going to what do you want the staff to do to avoid the attacks, or your clients to avoid, but then what do you do in response, and then how do you tidy up after that?
I guess as Teresa said, there are things that we can put in place to control these threats. Not necessarily avert them 100%. There's simple things like antivirus. Yes, antiviruses are will not protect for all the threats, but something is better than nothing, and it's a part of a whole software strategy. As in, you have to have antiviruses up to date all the time. Have anti-malware, think of a layered approach with the, firewalls, email filtering, and, that kind of thing. For small businesses, you can, look at implementing, like Teresa said, we call this unified threat management. It these are very sophisticated piece of software that avert threat even before it gets to people's desktop. So a combination of these things can actually avert a lot of these threats. But once again, like Teresa said, there is no silver bullet. Nothing is 100%.
Yeah, I think Teresa made a good point too around the response side, because certainly if you look at the notifiable data breach scheme, that's really designed more around when rather than if. So it's taking the approach that no matter what you do, it's going to be easy for someone to make a mistake, or for protection that you have in place to exploit a vulnerability. So yeah, it's more of a when, and so when it happens, you have to be prepared to respond in a way that what you're talking about too, Guru, is mitigate the risk. Because some of these things will happen despite all your efforts, and so you've got to have things in place to try and minimise the damage and also recover as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to mention is with the web browser. These days, web browsers are one of the most widely used piece of software on our desktops. So the attackers exploit certain vulnerabilities through the web browser. So it's really important to keep our web browsers up to date with all the security patches and everything. There are certain browsers that are not as safe than the other. I'm not going to go into those details, but having a good browser, keeping it up to date all the time is extremely important.
Can you give me a color? Okay, so basically what I'm hearing you say is that it is a business issue. Yes, it has a technical component, but it's mainly a business issue. Correct?
Yes, and it really starts from the top. So, small business like yourself, you're a single owner, so it would start with you. If you're a medium-sized or high-level company, it starts at the board, because it is a board responsibility to ensure that they've covered off on this risk for the company. And then it's about them having it implemented downwards, so to speak. But it's not something a director can get away with and say, well, we talked about that at a meeting 12 months ago, so we thought that was the end of it. It actually doesn't stop there. The requirement at the board level is that you constantly have it on your agenda and you're monitoring it and effectively putting in actions to whatever actions are necessary. And at that time, they're making sure all the staff underneath understand the requirements and the risk factors.
Yeah, and then with the measurements, I mean, the ultimate is to have lead indicators rather than lag indicators. The ultimate lag indicator would be, hey, we got hacked or there's an attack. So what lead indicators have you been using with your clients that have been really successful?
Well, I know from one client I've worked with, one of the things that we've looked at, they actually do monitor how often they're being attacked because their software will tell them that. So, I mean, the one thing is we've had no attacks. That's what we like to see on a board paper. Two then is if you know that you've had 2,000 plus try attempts in the last month and they haven't been successful, that does give you a little bit of confidence, I guess, that the processes and the software particularly that you've put in place is working to its best advantage. I guess the other indicators from a technical point of view, and Lene and Guru could probably talk about this a bit more, is it's about having, your patches, monitoring that. So you could talk to more about that. That's more at a hardware, software level of more so than governance, but what you would look at.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of, what Guru talked about earlier, making sure that on a monthly basis there's a regular cycle for patch management, your antivirus definitions are up to date, that there is a regular backup, there is a backup strategy, there's also a restore strategy, a DR strategy, and business continuity. So if you have all those things in place, then if anything happens, first of all, hopefully you've stopped it, but if it does get through, you have an issue, then once again you can recover.
Yeah. And then from the people side, because we've been talking about the processes of disaster recovery, your strategy for business continuity management, and you talked about the technology side of things with patch management and to make sure that all your you do all your browser security patches. But then from the people side, what type of training do people need to have in 2018? What's important?
It's a good question. Like we mentioned earlier, you know, sometimes it's information overload, but ideally you've got to really start with your core team, because your core team are going to be your change agents, and you know there'll be owners around some of these processes that look after your IT security process and procedures. You've got to get them on board. You've got to have, I guess, you've got to practice in the event of something happening. Who does what, clear roles and responsibilities. Outside of the core team, you know, you want to try and get the message out to everyone what this is all about, some of the behavioural changes. In terms of an organisation, you know, they do have the opportunity when, you know, you take on new staff to take them through orientation and teach them and educate them on things such as, you know, passwords, locking your computer, leaving things on a printer. You can take them through your IT policy. But organisations need to find a way to repeat that, because you can't tell it to a new person once and expect them to remember everything else you're going to give them. So, you know, depending on how big you are or how small you are, I mean, here at our firm on a regular basis, we get these privacy or training reminders to do certain things that keep us on top of, you know, these sort of important topics. So organisations need to find a way not to do it once, but to do it on a regular basis.
And do organizations provide, like, you know, test scenarios, like what you do with disaster recovery when you have all these drills and these unannounced disaster recovery test days? Do you do something similar like that in relation to cybersecurity, or is it all just banged up into the one big test?
There's minor tests you can do all the time, really. There's, you know, I shouldn't say this, but you can do what I call false phishing emails to your staff. So it's really testing whether your staff understand your policy. So you might send an email that looks like a ransomware or something that looks totally, and we've all probably received it, is the simple one of Australia Post. You have a parcel sitting at the post office waiting for you. And you can test whether your staff will actually click on that link. You know, and it has no harm to the business, but it actually does produce some testing and some training opportunities with your staff. Because just as Lene said, you can't just do this once with your staff. They're not going to remember. It's something you have to constantly reiterate to them so that they are just aware all the time that this stuff can happen. So there's those sorts of tests that you can do randomly without them even knowing, other than doing a big test. It's like anything. When you have a policy in place and you have a strategy, you do have to put it through at least once a year, put it through a testing process to make sure that everybody knows and understands what they need to do if a situation occurs.
But there's also a lot of resources online from trusted sources such as governments. The Australian government's a great one. They have a number of government departments that provide resources such as assessments. And some of these assessments, in a way, are there to provoke scenarios where you do have some sort of security breach. What would you do? Do you have the right processes in place? I also think some of the resources they have that would be useful to businesses are also alert systems. So when, you know, they come across or they're aware of a new strain of a virus that's causing havoc across, you know, other places, you know, that's fed to those who subscribe as well. So these resources are available, and, you know, obviously, as you say, outside of governments, there are trusted advisors we can go to who specialise in providing those sort of resources to customers as well.
Yeah. And as trusted advisors, I would think that that would be your accounting firm or your legal advisors. So who else should be on your trusted advisory board in relation to cybersecurity? Oh, so that's a new acronym for CAB. It's not Change Advisory Board, it's the Cyber Advisory Board.
You would certainly try, you know, for us, for instance, we use an external IT provider to give us advice on what software, etc., that we have. So I would rely on them to actually keep us abreast of what's happening in that area at least once a month, and they do that quite well.
And subscriptions to, you know, third parties, such as in Australia, you can subscribe to cert.gov.au. They give you a lot of resources. Even though it's a body, you can still interact with them as well. And also, you know, you may want a third party. So for us, we have a managed services provider. But from time to time, we will need to engage a third party just to make sure, just like an auditor, I guess, to make sure that, you know, from an organisation standing outside, everything on the inside is working well. You can also just include some of your key vendors to provide services to you. So, you know, it's good to have relationships with, you know, those who provide core services. So your telcos, if you're a big hardware type business with a lot of infrastructure, you would want them on board. Key software as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then looking into the future, because cybercrime is really on the increase. And as Teresa said earlier, the cyber criminals are getting smarter and smarter. And to be honest, you know, we can think we can catch up to them, but we probably won't. So how can we as business owners or business executives, how can we future-proof our business?
I guess I can tell from a technology point of view, I think some things that Teresa has already touched on. Making sure that there is a strategy to manage the data that is vital to the organization. You know, having your backup and disaster recovery plan in place, raising users' awareness within the organization. Just simple things like password management, having a password policy, expiry of the password, and, you know, all those simple things like that, and possibly even you know, educating the users on things which I think Lene and Teresa has already mentioned, what to do and what not to do. Just give an anecdote. There was one incident where a hacker actually left a USB key at the gates of an organization, and someone walking into the premises just picked up. It was a nice flashy 64 gig USB key, plugged it in, and that was it. Now, in a normal circumstance, that the vector that was in the USB, the virus or some sort of malware, would not have been able to, you know, it would not have gotten into the network. Now, this is the kind of sophistication and, you know, simple delivery mechanism hackers, you know, come up with. So it's all about awareness and making sure the employees know what to do and what not to do. Just simple strategies like that can go a long way.
And I just thought of something else that businesses can do. You can actually have companies come in and do what they call penetration testing, which is something middle to large organisations should do. Because really what they're doing is they're the good guys, and they're actually just testing whether they can or cannot get into your system quite easily. And that's where you would use the results of something like that and work with your cyber team to make sure that you've covered off on anything that they discover and or hopefully don't discover.
Like ethical hackers.
Ethical hackers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I might just add too, and you know, this is why you're talking to us, I guess, Ivanka, is I think for businesses, don't try and do it alone. You know, businesses have a core function of what they're trying to do, whether they're retailers or transport or whatever. When it comes to this side of things, there are resources, there are trusted advisors, There are suppliers out there, there is product, there is software. And they can use that to future-proof the business. And if I go back to what Teresa said, start with a plan. Start with risk mitigation, a risk plan. Start with the end in mind. What is it that you're protecting, and work your way backwards. And Guru said it. It may not be perfect, but having something in place is better than nothing. So get some help. There's good resources. There's advisors and members.
Wonderful. Well, I think on that note, that's a really good place to finish. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insights and experiences. And when people want to reach out to you with further questions and comments, they can reach you via the website pitcherpartners.com.au. And I will put that in the description as well. So any last word from you guys? The floor is all yours.
Look, if you have any questions, send us an email. And we'll gladly do our best to assist you in any way we can.
Sure. Stay safe with your passwords.
Don't hand them out.
Excellent. Thank you.